South Park's biggest sponsors keep showing up as the villains in its own episodes. A superstore with a mirror for a heart, ads that grow faces and walk among the living, toys that brainwash children into committing terror. The kids always see through it, the adults always buy in. And in this video, we're breaking down South Park's 30-year war with the hand that feeds it. Section 1. The Heart of Walmart. The strange thing about the way South Park talks about corporations is that it almost never lets the corporation be a simple villain. There is usually a moment late in the story when the show turns the camera around and points it at the audience instead. The most famous example of this arrived in the 8th season, in an episode that first aired on Comedy Central on the 3rd of November in 2004. It was the 120th episode the show had ever made, and on its surface it was a horror movie parody about a big store coming to a small town. Underneath that, it was one of the cleanest arguments the series ever built about who is really responsible when a corporation eats a community alive. The store in the episode is a thinly disguised version of the real Superstore, renamed by a single letter, and the title borrows from an old Ray Bradbury novel about an evil carnival rolling into town. The carnival this time sells bargains. The setup is gentle, almost cheerful. The whole town gathers in a field to watch the new store open, and the moment the doors part, every person in South Park is swept up in the joy of it. The prices are impossibly low. The shelves go on forever. A man can buy 3 copies of the same movie because buying 3 somehow feels like saving money, and the show lingers on that exact piece of broken logic because it is the whole engine of the episode in miniature. Cartman, standing in the DVD aisle, insists that buying 3 copies of a film at a discount is smarter than buying one at full price, and Kyle keeps trying to point out that he does not even want 1 copy. The argument never resolves. It just dissolves into the larger noise of everyone shopping, which is the point. Nobody in the store is thinking. They are being pulled. Then the bill comes due, the way it always does in these stories. The other businesses of South Park begin to die. The little shops on the main street, the family places, the stores that had been there for years, all of them empty out as the entire town funnels its money into the one enormous building on the edge of it. The show stages this as a kind of creeping rot. Storefronts go dark. The town starts to look hollowed out and gray. A ghost town with one bright humming temple of commerce sitting at the center of it. And the people who did this, who emptied their own town with their own wallets, slowly begin to realize what they have done, and they turn against the store. They decide they do not want it anymore. They want their town back. What follows is the part of the episode that makes the satire so sharp, because the town cannot actually stop. They confront the store's manager and demand that the place be shut down, and the manager, a frightened little man, tells them he is only a prisoner of the store himself before throwing himself out of a window. The townspeople try a boycott, and the boycott collapses almost instantly because nobody can resist the bargains. They try burning the building to the ground, gathering in the parking lot to sing around the flames, and the next morning the store has simply rebuilt itself overnight, standing there whole and bright as if nothing had happened. The thing cannot be killed by protest because the thing is not really the building. The boys figure this out before any of the adults do, which is the pattern the whole series runs on, and they decide to go to the source. So Stan, Kyle, and Kenny travel across the country to the company's headquarters in Bentonville, Arkansas, the real-life home of the real-life corporation, to find whoever is in charge and ask him how to stop it. Cartman tags along, but only because the store itself has started speaking to him, whispering in his head, recruiting him to defend it against his own friends. This is one of the small, cruel jokes the episode keeps making, that the corporation does not need to fight the children directly when it can simply turn one child against the others by appealing to his appetites. Cartman loves the store. The store loves Cartman. And so Cartman spends the trip trying to sabotage the very friends he is traveling with, slashing the tires on their bus, doing everything he can to protect the thing that is destroying his hometown because the thing gives him what he wants. At the headquarters, they find the company's president, an old man named Harvey Brown, and he is not the cackling monster they expected. He is ashamed. He explains that he was one of the founders, that the store began small and grew into something he can no longer control, something that crushed every competitor and devoured every town it touched. He has watched the thing he built become the thing he hates most, and he cannot stop it any more than the people of South Park can. When the boys ask him how to kill it, he tells them the only way is to find and destroy its heart, which is usually located somewhere near the television department. Then he asks them to tell the world that he is sorry, and he takes his own life right in front of them, the second authority figure in the episode to do so. The man at the very top of the corporation has no more power over it than the manager at the bottom. Both of them are crushed by the same machine. Neither of them owns it. The boys go home and mount a raid on the store at night, and this is where the episode delivers its real point. Stan and Kyle slip inside and make their way to the television department, where they are confronted by a figure who claims to be the store itself, a shape-shifting presence borrowed in style from the architect seen in a famous science fiction film. This entity says it can take many forms, that it is not just one store but all of them, every mega store and discount chain that has ever existed, and that they are all a single thing with a single name. It tells the boys that the heart they are looking for lies beyond a plasma screen television, in a small room marked for employees only. They go in, and what they find there is not a glowing crystal or a beating mechanical organ, it is a mirror. They look into it and see themselves. The heart of the store is the consumer. The heart is desire. The store has no power that the shoppers do not give it, and every bargain that emptied the town was a bargain the townspeople chose to chase. This is the moment the whole episode has been building toward. The turn that separates South Park's corporate satire from the easier version other shows would tell. It would have been simple to make the corporation a pure villain, a faceless evil that invaded a helpless town and ground it under. Instead, the show insists that the corporation is only a mirror held up to the people who feed it. The boys understand the symbolism instantly. Then they smash the mirror anyway, because understanding a thing and being willing to live differently because of it are two very separate acts, and the show knows that too. They destroy the heart, the building shakes, and the entire store collapses in on itself in a blinding flash, vanishing the same way a haunted house vanishes in an old horror film, leaving the relieved townspeople cheering in the parking lot. If the episode had ended there, it would have been a tidy little fable about the evils of big business. But South Park does not believe in tidy fables about corporations, because it does not believe the problem lives inside the corporations at all. So it keeps going for one more beat, and the final stretch of the episode is the cruelest and the truest thing in it. Randy stands before the gathered townspeople and delivers the moral, explaining with great pedantic seriousness that the store was really them all along, that their own consumerism had worked against them and nearly destroyed the small town charm they loved. Everyone nods, everyone agrees, and then somebody points out that they should all go support the little local drugstore down the street, the family place, the kind of business the superstore had nearly killed. So they do. They all stream into the little drugstore, and the show ends by showing that little drugstore in a quick time lapse growing. More and more people pour in. The store gets bigger, it expands, it adds floors and aisles and parking, and within the span of a few seconds it has swollen into something that looks exactly like the superstore they just destroyed, a giant glowing box at the edge of town. The townspeople, watching their beloved local business metastasize into the very thing they hated, decide the only thing to do is burn it down too. And as it burns, they vow never to shop there again, and they immediately head off to the next store down the road to begin the whole cycle over from the start. The episode closes on a loop with no exit, because the show has already told the audience where the heart is. The heart is desire, and desire does not get destroyed when a building falls down. It just goes looking for the next building. What makes this episode the foundation stone of the show's whole relationship with corporate culture is that it refuses to let the audience feel comfortable. A lazier story would have let the viewers root for the plucky town against the evil chain and walk away feeling righteous. This episode makes that impossible. It says in effect that there is no evil chain, only a population of people who want low prices and convenience more than they want their neighbors to stay in business, and who will say otherwise right up until the moment they pull into the parking lot. The corporation is not an invader, it is a service, offering people exactly what they keep asking for, and growing fat on the gap between what people say they value and what they actually buy. The store's founder could not stop it, the store's manager could not stop it, the town could not stop it, because the only thing that could stop it would be the town wanting something different, and the town does not want something different. It wants the bargain. This is the version of corporate satire South Park would return to again and again over the decades, refined and re-aimed at one industry after another, but the shape of it was set here. The company is a mirror, the appetite is the engine. The grown-ups are helpless against their own wanting, and the children are the only ones clear-eyed enough to see the trap, though even the children, in the end, can do nothing but smash the mirror and watch the appetite go find a new home. There's a reason the boys are the ones who travel to the headquarters, and the boys are the ones who reach the heart. The adults of the town are too busy shopping. They are inside the thing, swept along by it, unable to step back far enough to see its shape. It takes someone standing outside the crowd to recognize that the monster wears the crowd's own face. It is worth sitting with the detail of the two suicides, because they are doing more work than the dark humor suggests. The manager and the president are presented as the human faces of the corporation, the people you would naturally blame, the ones a protest would target, and the episode kills them both off precisely to make the point that blaming them is useless. They are not in control. The manager calls himself a prisoner of the store before he dies. The president built the store and watched it become a thing he despised, and dies asking the world to forgive him for it. Neither man is the villain, because there is no villain in the usual sense. No person you can remove to fix the problem. The store regenerates overnight no matter what happens to the people who run it, because it is fed by something far larger and far more diffuse than any executive. The daily choices of millions of people who would rather save a few dollars than think about where the savings come from. The episode also quietly understands something about scale that a lot of anti-corporate stories miss, which is that bigness is not a moral failing the corporation chose so much as a result the customers demanded. The little drugstore at the end is not corrupted by some outside force. It grows because people shop there, and it keeps growing because they keep shopping, and it becomes a giant because being a giant is what happens to a store that successfully gives a lot of people what they want at a price they like. The townspeople burning it down at the end are not fighting capitalism. They are fighting the predictable consequence of their own preferences, and they will lose because they are unwilling to change the preferences. The show finds this funny and also a little bit hopeless, and it lets both feelings sit side by side without resolving them. Years later, the same store would return in a 16th season episode, and the show would use it again, this time bending the joke toward the way people learn to game and exploit the systems that are supposed to serve everyone, with Cartman discovering the advantages of riding a mobility scooter through the aisles and demanding special treatment. But the original episode remains the definitive statement, the one that laid down the rule the show would follow for the rest of its run whenever it took aim at a company. The rule is that the company is never the whole story. The company is the answer to a question the public keeps asking, and the public does not want to hear what the answer says about them. South Park spent the next 20 years asking that question in a dozen different forms, pointing it at coffee chains and toy makers and movie studios and streaming services, and the answer kept coming back the same. Look into the heart of the thing you say you hate. There is a mirror in there. The face in the mirror is yours. The boys smash it every time. The appetite survives every time, and the next store is always already being built down the road. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The store turned out to be a mirror, and the town kept feeding the thing it claimed to hate. Next, the focus moves to the early years, to a coffee shop, a school report, and the moment the show admitted that the corporation might actually be making a better product than the little guy. Section 2, Gnomes, Coffee, and the Defense. Nobody expected 6 years before the Superstore rolled into town. South Park had already worked out the other half of its argument about corporations, and it did so in an episode that most people remember for one absurd joke, and almost nobody remembers for the surprisingly careful economics buried underneath it. The episode aired on the 16th of December in 1998, near the end of the second season, and it was written by the show's two creators along with a third writer. On the surface, it is about tiny magical creatures who sneak into bedrooms at night to steal underwear. Underneath, it is the show's first real attempt to think honestly about what happens when a big chain moves in next to a small family business. And the conclusion it reaches is one that almost no other comedy of its era would have dared to put on screen. The little guy the show suggests is not automatically the good guy. Sometimes the little guy just makes a worse product. The story starts in a classroom, with the boy's teacher under pressure to prove he actually teaches something, assigning the class to write a report on a current event and present it to the town committee. The boys get paired with Tweak, a twitchy, anxious, perpetually caffeinated boy whose parents run a small coffee shop. Tweak is convinced that gnomes come into his room every night at 3:30 in the morning to steal his underpants, and nobody believes him. The boys agree to stay over at his house to see the gnomes and work on the report, and Tweak's parents, being coffee people, keep the boys awake by pouring them cup after cup of coffee until the children are bouncing off the walls and then crashing into exhausted heaps, having written nothing. Meanwhile, the actual conflict of the episode is unfolding in the world of the adults. A national coffee chain called Harbucks, in an obvious nod to the real-life giant, wants to open a location in South Park, and it wants the spot right next to Tweek's family coffee shop. A representative from the chain comes to Tweek's father and offers to buy him out, first with a fancy briefcase and then with a large sum of cash, and Tweek's father refuses every offer. The representative, annoyed, tells him that the chain will simply open up right next door and put him out of business, and he is not subtle about it. He also, in passing, says that Tweek's coffee tastes terrible, a detail the episode plants early and pays off late because it turns out to be the truth. What Tweek's father does next is the thing the episode is really about. He does not compete. He does not improve his coffee or lower his prices or find some clever way to win customers. Instead, he reaches for the children. He realizes that the boys have a school report due, a report that will be presented to the whole town committee, and he sees a weapon. He writes the report himself, a piece of pure propaganda about the evils of big corporations crushing small businesses, and he hands it to the boys to deliver as their own. While he is giving his impassioned speech against the coffee chain, the gnomes are sneaking into the room and stealing Tweek's underpants right behind him, and only Tweek notices, which is the visual joke the episode keeps returning to. The adult is so consumed by his crusade that he cannot see the actual strange thing happening in his own house. The report works. The boys present Tweek's father's words to the town committee, and the committee is so moved by this stirring tale of corporate predators threatening a beloved local family that they take it all the way to the mayor and demand action. The mayor agrees to put the matter to a town vote, a measure that would decide whether the chain is allowed to stay at all. And here's the first thing the episode is quietly noticing, which is how easily an emotional story about the little guy can stampede an entire town into action, regardless of whether the story is accurate or fair. Nobody on the committee has tasted the chain's coffee. Nobody has tasted Tweek's coffee against it. They have simply heard a moving speech about David and Goliath, and they have picked David because picking David feels good. The boys, having delivered a report they did not write and do not understand, are now expected to deliver a second one for the vote, and they panic because they know nothing about business or corporations or any of it. In their desperation, they finally manage to catch the gnomes, and they follow the little creatures down into an enormous underground cavern piled high with mountains of stolen underpants. The gnomes, it turns out, consider themselves experts in business, and they agree to explain how the economy works in exchange for the boys' underwear. This is where the episode delivers its single most quoted joke, the gnomes' business plan laid out in 3 phases. Phase 1, collect underpants. Phase 3, profit. And when the boys ask what phase 2 is, the gnomes have no answer. There is no phase 2. They have never figured out the part in the middle, the part where collecting underpants somehow turns into money, and they have simply been collecting underpants for so long that they assume the profit must be coming from somewhere. The underpants gnomes became one of the most enduring jokes the show ever produced, a shorthand people still reach for whenever a plan has a beginning and an end, but nothing connecting them. But the joke is doing real work inside the episode, because it is a parody of exactly the kind of muddled anti-corporate thinking that Tweek's father has been peddling. The crusade against the chain has a phase 1, which is being angry at the big company, and a phase 3, which is the little shop somehow surviving and thriving. But there is no phase 2. Nobody has explained why the little shop deserves to win, or how it will keep winning, or what it actually offers that the chain does not. The whole campaign is collect underpants, ? Profit. It is emotion with a hole where the reasoning should be. When the boys give their final presentation before the vote, they do not give Tweek's father's speech. Having spoken to the gnomes, who despite their nonsense business plan, turn out to have a genuinely clear view of how corporations function, the boys deliver an argument almost nobody expected from a show this anarchic. They tell the town that big corporations are not the enemy. They point out that without large corporations, the town would not have computers or cars or most of the things that make modern life possible. They explain that even the coffee chain started as a small business once, and that it grew large because it made a good product that people wanted to buy. And then they admit in front of everyone that they did not write the first report at all. This is the moment the episode turns the easy story inside out. The townspeople, who had been ready to vote the chain out of existence on the strength of a moving speech, are stunned. And then Tweek's own mother stands up and does the bravest and most honest thing in the episode. She agrees with the boys. She admits that she and her husband had been using these children as pawns to pull at the town's heartstrings, and that it was wrong. And then she points out the thing nobody in the entire town had bothered to do throughout the whole crusade. Nobody had actually tried the chain's coffee. They had been fighting to destroy a business none of them had even sampled, on the assumption that the local product must be better simply because it was local. So the town tries the chain's coffee, and it is better. It is much better. Person after person tastes it and admits, some of them reluctantly, that this corporate coffee is genuinely good, far better than the bitter, unpleasant stuff Tweek's family had been serving. Even Tweek's father tastes it and concedes that it is superior to his own. The local shop had not been losing to the chain because the chain was a predator. It had been losing because the chain made a better cup of coffee, and the family had responded not by getting better, but by trying to legislate the competition out of town and using a moral panic to do it. The episode ends with the chain offering Tweek's father a job running their new South Park location, which he accepts. The little guy does not get crushed. He gets absorbed, and arguably he comes out ahead, now working for the successful business instead of slowly going broke fighting it. And the gnomes in the background simply keep stealing underpants from the oblivious townspeople, their three-phase plan still missing its middle, a reminder that the muddled thinking the episode was mocking has not gone anywhere and never will. The town learned its lesson about this one chain, but the underpants gnomes are still out there, still collecting, still waiting for a phase 2 that is never coming. What makes this episode so important to understanding the show's whole relationship with corporate culture is how completely it refuses to take the side the audience expects it to take. By 1998, the standard cultural script about a coffee chain moving in next to a family shop was already locked into place. The chain was the villain, the family was the victim. The right response was outrage and resistance. South Park looked at that script and asked a question nobody else in comedy was asking, which was, what if the family shop deserves to lose? What if the chain is not winning through some dark predatory magic, but simply through making something people prefer? What if the romance of the little guy is sometimes just a way of avoiding the uncomfortable truth that the little guy was not very good at his job? This is the same move the Superstore episode would make 6 years later, but pointed in a slightly different direction. The Superstore episode said the corporation is a mirror of the consumer's desire. The coffee episode said the corporation might simply be better at meeting that desire than its smaller rivals, and that nostalgia for the small and local can curdle into a kind of dishonesty, a willingness to punish a competitor for the crime of being good. Both episodes share a refusal to let the audience feel righteous. Both insist that the easy anti-corporate position is a way of not thinking, of reaching for a comforting story instead of looking at what is actually in front of you, and both put that clear-eyed view in the mouths of the children while the adults are off being swept up in crusades and panics and emotional appeals. One scholar of the show once described this episode as the most fully developed defense of capitalism the series ever produced, and that reading holds up. But it is worth being precise about what kind of defense it is. The episode is not saying corporations are good and small businesses are bad. It is saying that bigness by itself is not a moral category. A business is not virtuous because it is small or wicked because it is large. What matters is what it offers and whether people freely choose it, and the chain in this story wins because it offers a better product that people freely choose. The family shop loses because it offers a worse product and then tries to win through manipulation and moral pressure instead of through quality. The show is not cheering for the death of small business. It is refusing to pretend that small business is automatically owed survival regardless of whether it earns it. There's a darker thread running underneath all of this too, one the episode plays for laughs but never quite lets go of, which is the way Tweek himself is treated by everyone around him. Tweek is a nervous wreck, twitching and stammering and screaming, and the reason becomes clear over the course of the episode. His parents pump him full of coffee constantly. The boy is jittery because he is essentially a caffeinated child, and his parents either do not notice or do not care, because the coffee is the family business, and the family business is the thing they are willing to manipulate children to protect. Tweek's father uses the boys as pawns in his crusade. Tweek's parents feed their own son the very product that has wrecked his nerves. The small family business in this episode is not some warm, cozy alternative to the cold corporation. It is a place where a child is being slowly poisoned by his own parents' livelihood, and where those parents will reach for any weapon, including other people's children, to keep that livelihood alive. The show is not romanticizing the local shop, it is looking at it clearly, and what it sees is not entirely pleasant. This is the thing that separates South Park's corporate satire from almost everything around it. The show is suspicious of corporations, but it is equally suspicious of the easy stories people tell about corporations, the stories that let everyone feel good about themselves without having to think. It will mock a giant company in one episode and then, in another, mock the people who hate giant companies for hating them lazily and dishonestly. It holds two ideas at once, that big business can hollow out a town and feed on appetite, and that the people who complain about big business are often just protecting their own inferior products or comforting themselves with a David and Goliath fantasy that does not match reality. Both things are true. The show refuses to pick one and drop the other. By the time the Underpants gnomes finished explaining their plan, South Park had established the two poles its corporate satire would swing between for the next quarter century. On one side, the corporation as a mirror, growing fat on the gap between what people say and what they buy. On the other, the corporation as a genuine competitor, sometimes simply better than the alternatives, with the anti-corporate crusade revealed as its own kind of self-deception. The show would spend decades returning to these two poles, aiming them at toys and movies and streaming services and the entire machinery of modern entertainment. But the framework was already here, in a story about a coffee shop and a boy who could not stop twitching and a cave full of stolen underwear, waiting for a phase 2 that would never come. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The coffee chain won because it was simply better, and the crusade against it was revealed as a kind of lie people tell themselves. Next, the focus turns to a darker version of the same machine, to toys and cartoons engineered to hijack a child's brain, and to a corporation that sells children something far more dangerous than coffee. Section 3, Chin Pokemon and the Engineered Craving. There is a particular kind of fear that runs through the early seasons of South Park, a fear about what happens when a company learns to reach past the parents and speak directly into the mind of the child. The coffee episode had been about adults choosing between products. The Superstore episode had been about adults choosing convenience over their own town, but in the 11th episode of the third season, which aired on the 3rd of November in 1999, the show went somewhere stranger and more unsettling, into the question of what a corporation can do when it stops trying to persuade and starts trying to program. The episode is a parody of a real and enormous toy and cartoon craze that had swept through the country's children, renamed with a single crude joke that the show milks relentlessly, and on its surface it is about a fad. Underneath, it is about the way an entertainment company can manufacture a craving in a child and then steer that craving wherever it likes. The fad arrives the way all fads arrive in South Park, suddenly and completely. The boys see a commercial for a Japanese cartoon and its line of collectible toys, and within an afternoon, every child in town is obsessed. Cartman demands that his mother take him to the store immediately, and when he arrives, he is furious to find that every other child got there first and the shelves are nearly bare. The toys, the video game, the cartoon, all of it sweeps through the children like a contagion, and the show is precise about the mechanics of how it spreads. The cartoon itself contains constant embedded marketing, the characters reminding the audience to buy every single toy, to collect them all, to keep consuming. The fad is not an accident, it is engineered, built into the entertainment at the level of design so that watching the show is the same act as being sold to. The show captures something true and a little sad about how these crazes actually feel to a child, and it does it through Kyle. Kyle is initially the holdout, the one boy not caught up in the obsession, and his father even sits him down and gives him the speech every parent gives. The one about how fads come and go and how he does not have to be part of it, how he can make a stronger statement by being an individual and refusing the crowd. Kyle listens politely and then explains the actual reality of being a child, which is that he can either own the toy everyone else owns or be the one kid without it, singled out and mocked and beaten up for it. His father, defeated by the logic of the playground, simply hands him $10. And then, in the cruelest running joke of the episode, every time Kyle finally manages to buy the thing everyone has, the fad has already moved on. He buys the toy and learns the toys are out. The video game is in. He buys the game and learns the game is out. The special controller is in. He is always one purchase behind, forever spending money to catch up to a moving target, which is precisely how the machine is designed to work. The craving is never satisfied because a satisfied customer stops buying. While the children sink deeper into the obsession, the adults do what South Park adults always do, which is fail to understand the thing in front of them. Stan's parents sit down to watch the cartoon and try to determine whether it is teaching their son good values, and they cannot make any sense of it at all, because they have no context for the or the language or the world of it. They conclude that the show is not violent and not vulgar, but simply stupid and therefore harmless. This is the parental verdict that lets the whole scheme proceed. The shrug of an adult who has decided that because they do not understand a piece of children's media, it must be empty and safe. The episode treats this as a dangerous mistake. The cartoon is not empty. It is full of intent. The parents just cannot read it because the real plan, the thing the toys are actually for, is revealed slowly and absurdly. The toys contain tiny devices that transmit signals to the children's brains, and the cartoon and the video game are saturated with subliminal messaging, all of it building toward a single goal. The Japanese company behind the franchise, led by a figure named after a real emperor, is using the entertainment to brainwash American children, to fill them with contempt for their own country and devotion to a foreign one, and ultimately to turn them into soldiers. The video game trains them to bomb a harbor. The cartoon teaches them that America is the evil power that must be destroyed. The fad is a recruitment program, and the children, lost in their craving for the next toy and the next game, are being marched toward an attack on their own nation without any of them realizing it. The craze culminates in a special camp that all the children attend, which turns out to be a military training ground where they are taught to fly fighter planes toward the harbor. The historical reference the episode reaches for is deliberately provocative, tying the toy craze to old anxieties about an attack from across the Pacific, and the show is having fun with how far it can push the absurdity. But the satire underneath the provocation is not really about any one country. It is about the relationship between an entertainment corporation and the children it sells to. The episode is asking what it means when a company can reach into a child's mind through a screen and a toy, plant a desire there, and then shape that desire toward its own ends. The children in the episode are not stupid. They are simply children, and the company has built a machine specifically calibrated to exploit the way children work, their need to belong, their susceptibility to a constant cheerful voice telling them what to want, their inability to step back and see the shape of the thing they are inside. The brainwashing is just a heightened, literal version of what the show thinks. All of this entertainment is already doing in a quieter way. Manufacturing cravings, steering behavior, turning children into customers, and customers into something the company can use. The way the adults eventually defeat the scheme is the funniest and the most pointed part of the episode, because it has nothing to do with reasoning with the children or explaining the danger to them. The grown-ups try and fail repeatedly to break the spell. Whenever they confront the Japanese company directly, the executives distract them with a single trick, flattering the American men about a certain part of their anatomy, telling them how impressively large it is compared to their own. And the men are so easily flattered that they forget their objections entirely. Even the President of the United States falls for the trick. The adults are not just helpless against the corporation's hold on their children, they are helpless against their own vanity, so easily manipulated that a foreign power can stall the entire country's response with a compliment. What finally works is reverse psychology. The parents realize that the one reliable thing about children and fads is that whatever the parents like, the children will immediately decide is uncool. So at the airfield, as the children are climbing into their fighter planes to attack the harbor, the parents arrive and announce that they too love the cartoon, that they are fans now, that they think it is wonderful, and the spell breaks instantly. The moment the fad belongs to the adults, the children lose all interest in it. The brainwashing, the subliminal signals, the months of engineered craving, all of it evaporates the second the thing stops being cool, because the thing was only ever powerful as long as it belonged to the children and not to their parents. conglomerates. The corporation's hold turns out to be built on the same fragile foundation as the fad itself, which is the desire to have what the group has and to reject what the older generation embraces. All the children abandon the plan except Kyle, who is, as always, one step behind. By the time everyone else has lost interest, Kyle is still in his plane, ready to fly to the harbor because he had only just finally caught up to the fad and does not want to be the one kid still left out. Stan gives him a confused speech about how following the group is bad and Kyle should be an individual, and Kyle, taking this to heart, decides that to be a true individual, he must go ahead and complete the bombing run that everyone else has just abandoned. Stan, realizing his speech has backfired, hastily reverses it and explains that following the group is sometimes fine, that the group can help a person make good choices. Kyle, hopelessly confused by the contradiction, simply gives up and climbs out of the plane. The episode lets this stand as a small joke about how muddled the lessons around conformity and individuality really are, how the adults and even the other children cannot give Kyle a coherent rule to follow, leaving him to muddle through on instinct. The reason Kyle is at the center of all this is that the show uses him to represent the ordinary child caught in the machine, the one who is not a leader of the fad or an early adopter, but just a kid trying not to be left out. The whole apparatus of the corporation is aimed at children exactly like Kyle, children who do not particularly want the toy for its own sake, but who cannot bear the social cost of being the only one without it. His father's speech about individualism is useless to him because it ignores the real pressure he is under, the pressure of the playground, where having the right toy is not a luxury but a kind of survival. The corporation understands this pressure far better than Kyle's father does. It has built its entire strategy around it. And so Kyle keeps spending his money, keeps chasing the fad, keeps ending up one purchase behind because the machine was designed by people who understood his situation more clearly than the adult who was supposed to be guiding him. What the episode adds to the show's growing argument about corporate entertainment is the element of design. The idea that these cravings are not natural and not accidental, but deliberately manufactured by people who study children for a living. The coffee chain in the earlier episode won by making a genuinely better product. The superstore won by offering bargains people genuinely wanted. But the toy company in this episode wins through something more sinister, by reaching past the question of whether the product is good at all and going straight for the machinery of desire itself, building entertainment that exists not to be enjoyed but to sell, and then selling not just toys but a whole orientation toward the world. The cartoon is not stupid and harmless. The way Stan's parents decided, it is a delivery system, and the thing it delivers is whatever the company wants the children to want and eventually to do. There is also a quiet point being made about how the entertainment hides its intentions inside something that looks like play. The parents dismiss the cartoon because it seems silly, because they cannot follow it, because it has no obvious lesson, but the silliness is the disguise. A piece of entertainment aimed at children does not announce its purpose. It presents itself as fun, as harmless, as just a goofy show about collectible creatures, and the very harmlessness is what gets it past the adults. By the time anyone realizes the cartoon is doing something, the children have already absorbed months of its messaging. The show is suggesting that the most effective corporate manipulation of children does not look like manipulation at all. It looks like a toy. It looks like a game. It looks like the thing the child loves most, which is exactly why the parents wave it through. The episode was provocative enough that it was kept from airing in Japan, partly for naming the company's president after a real emperor, and partly out of caution about the larger industry it was mocking. The toys themselves became a recurring background gag in the show for years afterward, a permanent fixture of the South Park universe, which is its own small joke. The fad the children eventually rejected never really went away. It just settled into the scenery, the way real crazes do, replaced by the next thing but never fully gone. And the central insight of the episode settled into the show's worldview just as permanently. A corporation that learns to speak directly to children, past the parents, and into the part of the brain that decides what to want, becomes something close to a hostile power. It does not need to invade. It only needs to sell, and the selling does the rest. By the end of the third season then, South Park had built out a third pillar of its corporate satire. The first was the mirror, the company as a reflection of consumer appetite. The second was the honest competitor, the company that simply makes a better thing. The third, the darkest, was the engineer of desire, the company that manufactures the appetite itself and aims it wherever it pleases, using children as both the target and the weapon. The show would keep returning to this third idea as the technology grew more sophisticated and the techniques more refined, as the screens lines got smaller and the targeting got sharper. But here, in 1999, in an episode disguised as a joke about a toy craze, it had already named the fear. The most dangerous thing a corporation can sell a child is not a bad product. It is a craving the child did not choose, attached to a purpose the child cannot see. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The toy company reached past the parents and built a craving straight into the child's mind, then steered it wherever it liked. Next, the focus turns to the man who keeps trying to ride these machines to riches. The father who buys a dying business at the exact moment the world moves on and loses his mind defending it. Section 4, Randy Marsh and the business that already died. There is a recurring figure in South Park's long argument about corporate culture who is neither the company nor the consumer exactly, but something more pathetic and more human than either. The small operator who is always one step behind, who keeps trying to ride the wave of an industry just as that wave is breaking, who sinks his family's money into a thing the moment the world has decided to abandon it. That figure, more often than not, is Randy Marsh. Across the run of the show, Randy has chased nearly every business and entertainment trend the culture has produced, almost always at the wrong time and almost always at his family's expense. But the purest, saddest, funniest version of this arrived in the 12th episode of the 16th season, which aired on the 24th of October in 2012, an episode that takes the form of a Halloween horror parody and is really a story about a man losing his mind inside the corpse of a dead industry. The episode opens with Randy bursting into the house, thrilled, carrying gifts and a bottle of champagne, announcing that the family is rich now because he has made the investment of a lifetime. He has bought a video rental store. Specifically, he has bought a location of the famous national video rental chain, the blue and yellow brand that an entire generation grew up renting movies from on Friday nights, and he paid $10,000 for it. He hands his children t-shirts that proudly declare their father the owner of a video store, and he beams at them, certain he has secured the family's future. His children are confused. His son Stan, on the drive down to see the store, gently points out the obvious, that nobody rents movies anymore, that watching things online is more convenient, that the whole way people get their entertainment has changed. Randy does not hear it. He cannot hear it. He has already decided what the future is, and the future is a video rental store. The store itself, when they arrive, is dilapidated and empty, a relic, and Randy walks his family through it like a man giving a tour of a palace. He lists the supposed advantages of the business, certain that customers will come flooding in, and then the days pass and nobody comes. The episode tracks the slow accumulation of failure with a kind of patience that makes it almost unbearable to watch. Randy asks his daughter how many copies of a particular movie they have left, and she tells him furiously that they still have all 6, meaning not one has rented. A child loses a ball near the store's front door, and Randy seizes the opportunity to ask the kids if they would like to come in and rent some DVDs, and the children stare at him in blank incomprehension because they do not even know what he is talking about, and then they run away screaming. The world has moved so far past the thing Randy bought that the children of the town do not recognize it as a thing at all. They are frightened of it the way one might be frightened of a haunted house. And that is exactly the form Randy's breakdown takes. As the store continues to fail, as the absence of customers becomes undeniable, Randy begins to lose his grip on reality. And the episode renders this as a parody of a famous horror film about a man going insane in an empty, isolated hotel. Randy starts seeing ghosts in the aisles, the spirits of old customers from decades past, a woman who cannot find a particular film, a man telling someone that the war is over and they should rent a movie. He rages at these apparitions, jumping up and down, screaming at empty air, while his son watches from a distance and quietly tells his mother that something is wrong with Dad. The store is so far out of its time that Randy decides it must be old enough to be haunted, and rather than accept that he made a catastrophically bad investment, he descends into a full delusion, hallucinating the past, arguing with ghosts, recreating the slow madness of a man trapped somewhere the living have abandoned. The thing the episode understands about Randy, and about the type he represents, is that the breakdown is not really about the store at all. It is about his inability to admit he was wrong. Randy cannot accept that he poured his family's money money into a dying industry, that his big idea was actually a decade too late, that the convenient streaming his son tried to tell him about has already won and is never giving the ground back. To admit that would mean admitting that he, the father, the supposed provider, the man who came home with champagne, had made a fool of himself and put his family at risk for nothing. So instead he doubles down, gets more defensive, more delusional, more committed to the fantasy that customers will come, until the fantasy curdles into actual madness. The horror parody is funny, but it is also exactly right as a portrait of a certain kind of denial, the denial of a person who has bet everything on the wrong horse and would rather lose his mind than lose face. Meanwhile, the episode keeps the larger world turning around him, and the larger world is precisely the thing that killed his store. The threat to the town that Halloween is a gang of robbers who have been hitting the automated movie rental machines, the little red kiosks that had themselves replaced stores like the one Randy bought, and which were in turn already being replaced by streaming. The episode is layering the death of one technology on top of another, the kiosks killing the stores, the streaming killing the kiosks, an entire industry collapsing and reinventing itself in fast forward, while Randy stands inside the oldest, deadest layer of it screaming at ghosts. The thieves, in a small, absurd detail, do not even understand the thing they are robbing, assuming the kiosks must be full of cash, when of course they are not. Everyone in the episode is slightly out of step with the technology around them, but Randy is the most out of step of all. So far behind that, he has wrapped all the way around into the supernatural. The store's end comes not through any business decision, but through fire. Randy's daughter, sick of being trapped in the empty store with her unraveling father, simply burns the place down, dousing it in gasoline, while Randy, fully lost now, does not even notice, frozen in a snowbank in the parking lot in a direct echo of the way the famous horror film ends. The next morning, the building is gone, burned to nothing, and Randy's wife tells him almost gently that she has spoken to the insurance company and they will be able to recover some of the money. The investment is over, the dream is dead, and Randy, still half frozen and barely present, simply mutters his fast food order to her as she prepares to leave. The grand business venture that was going to make the family rich ends with a man giving his lunch order from a snowbank beside the smoking ruin of a store the world abandoned years before he ever bought it. What makes this episode such a clean expression of one strand of the show's corporate satire is the way it locates the failure entirely inside Randy, not inside the company or the technology. The streaming services and the kiosks are not villains here. They are just the future, arriving on schedule, doing what the future does. The video rental chain is not a victim of corporate predators. It is a victim of its own obsolescence, a business model that served its time and then stopped making sense, the way business models do. The only real fool in the story is the man who bought into it at the exact moment it died, and who could not bring himself to look at the obvious truth his 10-year-old son was trying to tell him on the drive down. The corporation in this telling is not even particularly important. What matters is the human folly of the person trying to climb aboard a sinking thing because it once seemed like a safe and respectable way to get rich. This is a pattern Randy would repeat across the entire series, and it is worth understanding it as a single recurring critique. Randy is forever trying to monetize whatever the culture is currently doing, always slightly wrong about the timing, always dragging his family into the scheme. In one stretch, he became obsessed with a cooking competition show. In another, he reinvented himself in various ways for attention and money. And in the show's longest and most sustained version of this, he uprooted the entire family to start a marijuana farming operation, a business he insisted on treating as a family enterprise and using to extract labor and loyalty from his children, building a whole brand around a virtue he conspicuously lacked. The video store episode is the compact, perfect version of the type. A man hears that there is money to be made, picks the wrong moment and the wrong industry, commits totally, refuses all evidence that he has erred, and rides the mistake straight into a breakdown while his family pays the cost. The deeper thing the show is getting at through Randy is something about the relationship between ordinary people and the great machine of corporate entertainment. The industries that South Park satirizes, the toy companies, and the studios and the chains are enormous and impersonal, and most people do not get to be the corporation. Most people are like Randy, standing at the edge of the machine, watching the money move through it, desperate to grab some for themselves, and almost always too late and too clumsy to do it well. Randy is the consumer who dreams of becoming the producer, the fan who wants to be the owner, and the show treats this dream with a mixture of contempt and pity. He is ridiculous, yes, but he is also genuinely trying to provide for his family in a world where the rules keep changing and the safe-seeming investments keep turning out to be graveyards. The video store looked like a real business. For a previous generation, it would have been one. Randy is not insane for wanting it, he is only insane for not noticing that its time had passed. There is a particular cruelty in how the show stages Randy's relationship with his son throughout this. Stan is the one who tells him the truth at the start, calmly and correctly, that nobody rents movies anymore. Stan is the one who notices partway through that his father is genuinely losing his mind and who reports this with a kind of weary resignation to his mother. The child sees clearly and the father does not, which is the inversion the whole series runs on. But here it carries an extra weight because what Stan sees clearly is specifically the economic reality, the future of the industry, the simple fact that the family's money is gone. The 10-year-old understands streaming better than the adult does. The 10-year-old understands the death of an industry better than the man who just bought into it. And the adult, rather than listen, retreats into ghosts and delusion, leaving the child to watch his father come apart over a business decision the child could have warned him against and in fact did. The episode also quietly captures something about how quickly the ground shifts under everyone in the age of corporate entertainment. The video rental chain had once been a giant, a cultural fixture, the place where families went on weekends, a brand so dominant it seemed permanent, and within a span of years it had become a thing children did not recognize, a relic so dead that a child would be frightened of it. The episode came out at a moment when the streaming services that destroyed the rental stores were themselves still young, and in the years since, those services have fragmented and multiplied and grown expensive in ways that have made some viewers look back at the simplicity of a single rental store with something like nostalgia. The show could not have known that, but it accidentally captured the churn perfectly, an industry that seemed eternal, dead almost overnight, replaced by something that seemed like the obvious future, which would itself become a mess of competing services within a decade. Randy bought into the dead layer, but every layer becomes a dead layer eventually. That is what the machine does. By the end, Randy gets his insurance money, which means he loses less than he might have, which is its own small joke about the way these schemes tend to resolve for a man like him. Not in total ruin, just in a smaller, quieter failure, absorbed and forgotten, ready to be repeated the next time the culture produces a new trend for him to misjudge. He does not learn anything. He never learns anything. The next obsession is always coming, the next investment, the next certainty that this time he has found the way to ride the great machine to wealth. The video store burns down and Randy gives his fast food order from the snow, and somewhere down the line there will be another store, another scheme, another industry he climbs into at exactly the wrong moment, with his family trailing behind him, paying for it, watching him clearly while he sees only ghosts. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Randy kept trying to ride the machine and kept climbing aboard just as it sank, losing his mind defending a corpse. Next, the focus turns to the children themselves becoming the product, to a scheme that turns helpless kids into entertainment, and a deal with a video game giant that takes everything and pays nothing. Section 5. The children as product. So far, the show's corporate targets have mostly been things adults choose. A store they shop at, a coffee they prefer, a toy they buy for their kids, a business they invest in. But South Park has always understood that the most disturbing version of corporate exploitation is the one where a human being becomes the product itself, where the thing being bought and sold is not a good or a service but a person, and where that person has no say in the transaction and receives nothing from it. The cleanest and most uncomfortable expression of this arrived in the 5th episode of the 15th season, which aired on the 25th of May in 2011. It is an episode built around one of the most tasteless premises the show ever attempted, and underneath the tastelessness, it is a precise and angry argument about how the entertainment and sports industries make fortunes off the labor of people they refuse to pay. The episode begins with a sentimental commercial, the kind with sad music and footage of suffering, this one about babies born addicted to crack, asking for donations. Kyle is moved by it and goes to the hospital to volunteer his help, but when he gets there, he finds that Cartman has already arrived with a very different idea. Cartman, along with a couple of the other boys, has discovered that these crack-addicted babies will fight each other ferociously over a small rock of crack, and he has turned this into a spectacle, filming the babies scrambling and brawling over the drug and putting it online. The business takes off immediately. People watch. The videos spread. Cartman has found a way to monetize the suffering of helpless infants, and the money starts rolling in. The premise is deliberately appalling, and the show knows it, but the appalling premise is the vehicle for the satire, not the satire itself, because the real target becomes clear when Kyle, who is horrified at first, gets drawn into the operation as its accountant and starts asking uncomfortable questions about the money. Specifically, he becomes uneasy about the plan to sign a deal with a major video game company to produce a game based on the babies fighting, selling the likenesses of these infants while giving the babies themselves absolutely nothing. The babies do all the work, the babies are the entire product, and the babies will not see a cent. Kyle, troubled, says this feels wrong, and Cartman responds that he will simply find out how other companies get away with doing exactly this, because surely there must be an established, respectable model for profiting off the labor of people you do not pay. And so Cartman goes looking for that model, and the show makes its real point with a single devastating image. Cartman dresses himself as a southern plantation owner, complete with the costume and the manner, and travels to the athletic department of a major university to ask for advice. He refers to the college's student athletes openly as slaves, and he wants to know how the university manages it, how an institution can field a team of athletes who generate enormous revenue through ticket sales and merchandise and broadcasting rights and video game deals, and pay those athletes nothing. He has come to the experts. He has identified the people who have perfected the exact thing he is trying to do, profiting off the bodies and labor of people who receive no share of the money, and he wants to learn from the masters. The university president is offended and throws him out, but the point has landed. Cartman did not invent this scheme. He simply noticed that the college sports system was already running it on a vastly larger scale with the full blessing of respectable society. The comparison is brutal and intentional. The crack babies fighting over a rock for the entertainment of paying viewers are a grotesque exaggeration, but the structure underneath them, the show insists, is identical to the structure of college athletics. In both cases, there are performers whose labor generates the value. In both cases, there is an organization that captures all the revenue. In both cases, the performers are denied any share of the money, with the denial dressed up in some justifying language. The college calls its unpaid performers student athletes and points to the value of a free education as compensation. The way the episode notes, a pittance against the billions the system generates. Cartman just calls his performers what they are and tries to copy the model. The episode is arguing that the respectable version and the grotesque version are the same thing wearing different clothes, that the only real difference is that one of them has decades of tradition and television contracts to make it look normal. Kyle, trying to make the arrangement feel less monstrous, proposes a compromise. He suggests that they take a portion of the money, 30% of the proceeds from the video game deal, and use it to build a state-of-the-art orphanage for the crack babies. This way, he reasons, the babies whose suffering is generating all this wealth will at least get something out of it. And here, the episode makes a sharp observation about how this kind of exploitation actually sustains itself, because Cartman, who has no moral interest in the babies at all, approves the orphanage plan immediately. He approves it not out of compassion, but because he recognizes the public relations value, the goodwill it will generate, the way a gesture toward the welfare of the exploited can make the exploitation itself look generous and even noble. The orphanage is not charity, it is marketing. It is the thing the operation can point to in order to keep the money flowing while looking like a force for good. This, the episode suggests, is exactly how the big institutions launder their exploitation, by pairing it with a visible, advertisable kindness that distracts from the underlying extraction. The actual climax of the episode is where the corporate target comes fully into focus, because when the boys travel to finalize their deal with the video game company, they discover what the company has actually written into the contract. The head of the company, portrayed as a cigar-smoking, bourbon-drinking figure straight out of the same plantation imagery Cartman had been playing with, informs them that the company now owns the rights to the entire operation and will keep all of the revenue. The boys had thought they were the ones doing the exploiting, and they were, but they had not understood that they were small fish in a much larger sea, that the real corporation, the video game giant, would simply take the whole thing from them and give them nothing in return. The exploiters get exploited. Kyle's dream of the orphanage collapses because there is no money left for it, because the company that everyone wanted to do business with structured the deal so that it captured everything, and the people who actually built the operation walked away with empty hands. The choice to portray the video game company this way was not random. The real company the episode is parodying had a reputation at the time for buying up smaller studios, absorbing their work, and squeezing maximum profit out of their products. And the episode is taking direct aim at that reputation, at a corporation known for acquisition and extraction, for treating the creative labor of others as raw material to be processed into revenue. So the episode ends up nesting one exploitation inside another. The college athletics system exploits the athletes. Cartman's operation exploits the babies in imitation of that system. And the video game corporation exploits Cartman's operation in turn, taking the whole thing and paying nobody. At every level, the pattern repeats. The people who generate the value get nothing, and the organization at the top of the chain takes it all. The babies are the product is sold, the product receives nothing. That is the whole machine, drawn 3 times over in a single episode. There is a strange, almost tender subplot running alongside all of this, in which a couple of the boys spend the episode trying to find a famous rock guitarist to perform at one of their events, and slowly come to believe that this guitarist might not actually be a real person at all, but a kind of myth, a made-up figure like a holiday gift bringer that their parents invented and dressed up as. The subplot seems disconnected from the main satire, but it lands a quiet final note. After the video game company strips them of everything and Kyle's orphanage dream dies, the boys are crushed, partly by the loss of the business and partly by the revelation that the guitarist they idolized may not be real, that their parents lied to them. And then, in the final scene, Stan and Kyle discover that the orphanage has been built after all, that someone funded it, and they find the guitarist's hat and guitar in the corner, suggesting that perhaps the mythical figure was real, and was the one who quietly did the good thing the corporation refused to do. That ending is doing something gentle and a little sad underneath the cynicism of the rest of the episode. The corporation took everything and gave nothing. The whole machine of monetized exploitation ground forward and left the babies with no orphanage and the boys with no money. And the only thing that actually delivered on the promise of care, the only force that built the thing meant to help the helpless, was a figure who might not even exist, a myth, a fantasy, something closer to a miracle than to any real economic actor. The implication is quietly devastating. The systems that generate the wealth, the colleges and the corporations and the schemes, are not going to take care of the people whose labor and suffering they profit from. If anyone does, it will be something outside the system entirely, something almost magical, something the boys cannot even be sure is real. The market will not provide the orphanage, only a fairy tale will. What this episode adds to the show's growing argument about corporate entertainment is the recognition that the cruelest arrangements are also the most normalized. The crack baby premise is shocking, and it is supposed to be, but the shock is a tool to make the audience see something they have stopped seeing. College sports are an ordinary, beloved, deeply embedded part of the culture. Millions of people watch them, cheer for them, buy the merchandise, play the video games. And underneath all of that affection sits a structure the show wants its audience to recognize as exploitation. Performers generating billions while being told that a scholarship is payment enough. By placing that structure next to something the audience finds obviously monstrous, the episode is trying to break the spell of familiarity, to make people look at the normal thing and see the grotesque thing inside it. Cartman dressing as a plantation owner to ask the university for advice is the whole argument in one image. The respectable institution and the cartoon villain are doing the same thing, and the only reason one of them seems acceptable is that everyone is used to it. The episode also understands the role that visible kindness plays in keeping the whole arrangement running, which is why Kyle's orphanage matters so much to the satire. The orphanage is the part of the scheme that lets everyone feel okay about it. It is the gesture that converts raw exploitation into something that can be defended, even celebrated. And the show is sharp enough to notice that Cartman, who cares nothing for the babies, embraces the orphanage purely for its image value, because he understands that a system of exploitation runs more smoothly when it is wrapped in charity. The real institutions do this constantly, pairing their extraction with foundations and scholarships and good works, building the orphanage in public so that nobody looks too hard at where the money actually goes. The episode lets the audience watch this calculation happen in real time. Watch a purely cynical actor recognize the public relations value of compassion, and in doing so, it exposes the machinery that lets so much corporate exploitation pass as benevolence. By the end, the children are left with nothing, the babies are left with nothing, and the corporation has taken everything, which is the show's honest answer to where these arrangements lead. The performers do not get paid. The promised good deeds do not get done unless something outside the system steps in to do them, and the institution at the top of the chain walks away with the entire prize, having structured the deal so that it could never lose. The episode is one of the show's angriest pieces of corporate satire precisely because it does not offer the comfort of a villain who can be defeated or a system that can be reformed. It simply shows the machine working as designed, taking the labor of the powerless and converting it into profit for the powerful. And it dares the audience to notice that this machine is not some grotesque exception, but the ordinary engine of an industry they love and feed every single day. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The babies were the product, and the corporation took everything while paying nothing, with the same machine running in respectable clothes all around us. Next, the focus crosses into the second half of this story, into the franchise machine, the endless reboots and recycled nostalgia, and a fruit that whispers about the good old days. Section 6, Member Berries and the Nostalgia Machine. When South Park began its 20th season in the autumn of 2016, the show was 20 years old, which meant it had been on the air long enough to watch an entire culture grow addicted to its own past. The first episode of that season aired on the 14th of September in 2016, and buried inside an hour of jokes about election year politics and online trolling was an idea that would haunt the rest of the season and become one of the show's most quoted inventions. The idea was a small purple fruit, something like a grape, with a tiny face that whispered to whoever ate it about how good things used to be. The show called them Member Berries, a pun on the way people say remember, and they were the show's diagnosis of a sickness it saw spreading through the entire entertainment industry and the culture around it. An addiction to nostalgia so powerful that it had replaced the ability to make anything new. The berries are introduced almost casually. The town is gripped by an anxious political mood, and one of the fathers recommends a soothing superfood to take the edge off. These little berries that make you feel good. Randy tries them, and the moment he eats one, a tiny voice pipes up, soft and pleasant and high-pitched, reminding him of something from the past. "Remember Chewbacca?" it asks. "Remember the original films?" And Randy feels a warm wave of comfort wash over him. The pure pleasure of recognition, of being reminded of a thing he loved long ago. The berries do not say anything new. They only point backward, naming beloved things from decades past. And the naming itself produces a kind of bliss, a soft narcotic glow of remembered happiness that requires no thought and asks nothing of the person feeling it. What makes the berries such a precise piece of satire is the timing of what they choose to remember. Every single thing the berries reference, the show is careful to note, was at that exact moment being rebooted, revived, sequelized, or otherwise dragged back into the present by the entertainment industry. When a berry sighs about a beloved space saga from the 70s, the joke is that the audience cannot actually tell whether the warm feeling they are having is about the original films or about the brand new sequel that had just come out. A sequel that critics had noted was almost suspiciously similar to the original, hitting all the same beats, reviving all the same characters, designed to trigger precisely the kind of nostalgic glow the berries produce. The berries are not just a metaphor for memory. They are a metaphor for the specific business model that had taken over Hollywood, the model of strip mining the past, of repackaging the things a generation loved as children and selling them back to that same generation as adults, knowing that the warm glow of recognition would do most of the work that quality used to have to do. The episode makes this explicit through a parallel storyline that is, on its surface, about something completely different. The country is in turmoil over athletes protesting during the national anthem, and the divisions have grown so bitter that the government decides the anthem itself needs to be fixed. Their solution is to hire a famous Hollywood director, one specifically known for taking old, beloved properties and rebooting them into shiny new versions that please everyone, to reboot the national anthem. The director is portrayed as a recluse who communicates only through lights, and he agrees to take on the job. And the show is making a pointed joke here about a real filmmaker whose career had become synonymous with exactly this kind of reverent, careful, crowd-pleasing revival of cherished things. The anthem, in other words, is being treated like a film franchise, handed to the reboot specialist to be sanded down and made palatable. Its problem solved not by addressing anything real, but by giving it the nostalgia treatment. And the punchline, when the rebooted anthem is finally unveiled, is the whole argument in miniature. The new anthem turns out to be exactly the same as the old one. The only difference is that now people are allowed to choose whether they sit, stand, or kneel during it. Nothing has actually changed. The substance is identical. The reboot has simply added a small optional tweak and presented the same product as something fresh and reconciling, and this is precisely the criticism that had been leveled at the director's actual film work, that his celebrated revival of the famous space saga was so faithful to the original that it was essentially the same movie wearing new clothes. The show is drawing a straight line between the entertainment industry's reboot machine and a kind of cultural paralysis, an inability to genuinely move forward, a tendency to take any real problem and resolve it by reaching backward for the comfort of the familiar rather than forward toward anything new. But the berries themselves carry a darker payload than just a joke about reboots, and this is where the season's central insight lives, because the more Randy eats them, the more their messages drift. At first, the berries only remember pop culture, films and characters, and songs, the harmless warm stuff of shared childhood. But gradually they begin to remember other things. Remember when marriage was only between a man and a woman? One whispers. Remember when there weren't so many immigrants? Remember Reagan? The nostalgia the show reveals does not stay confined to entertainment. The same warm, thoughtless glow that makes a person yearn for an old movie can be redirected almost imperceptibly toward a yearning for an older social order, for a past that was simpler and whiter and more exclusionary, and the berries make no distinction between the two kinds of remembering. They deliver both with the same soothing voice, the same pleasant high-pitched sweetness, because to the machinery of nostalgia, a beloved film and a bigoted memory are the same product, a hit of comfort that lets a person feel good about the past without thinking critically about it. This is the genuinely unsettling idea at the heart of the member berries, and it is what elevates them above a simple gag about Hollywood reboots. The show is suggesting that the entertainment industry's addiction to nostalgia and the culture's drift toward a reactionary politics of the good old days are not separate phenomena, but two expressions of the same impulse. Both are a refusal to engage with the difficult present in favor of the comforting past. Both replace thought with feeling, analysis with recognition, the hard work of building something new with the easy pleasure of being reminded of something old. The reboot and the political slogan about restoring a lost greatness are running on the same engine. They are both selling the memberberry high, the warm narcotic glow of remembering, and they are both betting that people will be so soothed by the feeling that they will not notice they are being given nothing new and asked to want something backward. The berries grew into one of the show's most durable creations, recurring throughout the season and beyond, eventually becoming almost a low-level threat in their own right, a creeping infection of pure nostalgia that the characters had to try to contain. In later episodes, they are shown to be more aware than they first appeared, more sentient, harder to kill, escaping their containers and spreading. The image of a tiny sweet fruit that whispers comforting lies about the past, and quietly turns those whispers toward darker territory became a kind of permanent fixture in the show's vocabulary, a way of naming a particular sickness it kept seeing everywhere, the substitution of memory for thought, of the warm, reassuring past for the difficult, uncertain future. What the member berries add to the show's long argument about corporate entertainment is the recognition that nostalgia is not a neutral feeling, but a product, and a particularly insidious one, because it disguises itself as love. When a person feels the memberberry glow about an old film, they experience it as affection, as a pure and innocent fondness for something that meant a lot to them once. But the show insists that this feeling is being manufactured and harvested, that the entertainment industry has learned to produce it on demand and to sell it back endlessly because nostalgia is cheaper than creativity and more reliable than originality. A studio does not have to invent a beloved character if it can simply revive one. It does not have to earn the audience's affection if if it can borrow the affection the audience already has for something from decades ago. The member berry is the perfect product because it costs almost nothing to make and the customer arrives pre-sold, already in love, already glowing, ready to pay for the feeling of remembering a thing they loved before they knew better. There is a particular sadness in the way the show frames this, because the affection underneath the nostalgia is real. People genuinely did love these old films, these characters, these songs. The childhood happiness the member berries reference was not fake, and that is exactly what makes the harvesting of it feel like a betrayal. The industry is not inventing the love, it is exploiting a love that already exists, taking something pure that people actually felt and converting it into a revenue stream, selling people their own memories at a markup and giving them less and less of substance in return with each cycle. The member berries are sweet, and the sweetness is the trap. They taste good. The feeling they produce is pleasant. Nobody eats a member berry and feels manipulated in the moment. The manipulation is invisible precisely because it works through a genuine emotion, and the genuine emotion makes people defend the very thing that is exploiting them. The episode is also quietly noticing how nostalgia short-circuits the ability to evaluate quality. When the rebooted anthem turns out to be identical to the original with one small tweak, the people are largely satisfied because the familiarity itself feels like a kind of value. The same was true of the film reboots the show was mocking. A reboot that simply recreates the beloved original does not need to be good in any independent sense, because the audience's pre-existing love does the work that craftsmanship used to do. The member berry glow papers over the absence of anything new. People walk out feeling they have seen something wonderful, when really they have only been reminded that they once loved something, and the reminding felt enough like loving that they could not tell the difference. This is the cultural paralysis the show is diagnosing. An industry and an audience locked in a loop, the industry serving recycled comfort and the audience consuming it gratefully, neither side able or willing to break out into the risk and difficulty of making or wanting something genuinely new. And the political dimension, the way the berries slide from remembering films to remembering a more exclusionary past, is the show's warning about where this loop leads. A culture that has trained itself to prefer the comfortable past to the difficult present, that has learned to substitute the warm glow of nostalgia for actual thought, becomes vulnerable to anyone selling a return to a mythologized golden age. The same muscle that yearns for the old movie can be made to yearn for the old social order, and the entertainment industry, by relentlessly cultivating that yearning, by training a generation to find its deepest pleasure in looking backward, helps prepare the ground for a politics built on the same impulse. The member berries do not care what they make you remember. They only care that you keep eating them, that you keep choosing the past over the present, that you keep paying for the feeling. And the show is suggesting that an entire civilization had become addicted to that feeling, served by an entertainment machine that had discovered there was infinite money in selling people their own memories, and that this addiction was quietly reshaping not just what people watched, but what they wanted and how they thought. By the end, the member berries had become one of the show's sharpest statements about the state of corporate entertainment, a single sweet image that captured the entire reboot economy and its hidden costs. The industry had stopped trying to make new things and started mining the affection people held for old things. The audience had stopped demanding new things and started craving the comfort of the familiar, and the whole arrangement, pleasant and profitable and warm, was quietly hollowing out the culture's capacity to imagine a future, replacing it with an endless, sweet, narcotic loop of remembering. Remember the original films? Remember when things were simpler? The berries kept whispering, and the culture kept eating, and the machine kept selling the past back to the people who had already lived it at a price that went up every year while the thing being sold grew thinner and thinner. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The nostalgia machine learned to sell people their own memories, and the warm glow quietly replaced the ability to want anything new. Next, the focus turns to the company that perfected the recycling, to a stone that makes the same movie over and over, and to the moment South Park named Disney as the villain. Section 7, the Pander Stone and the Disney Machine. By the autumn of 2023, the thing the member berries had diagnosed 7 years earlier had a name, a face, and a corporate headquarters, and South Park went after all three. On the 27th of October that year, the show released a special on its streaming platform, the fifth of the long-form specials it had begun producing, and it pointed itself directly at the largest entertainment company in the world. The special took aim at the studio that owned the famous space saga, the superhero films, the animated classics, and most of the cultural memory of several generations, and it built its satire around a single invented object that captured the entire problem the show saw in modern corporate filmmaking, an ancient piece of artificial intelligence that could produce the same movie over and over again while appealing to absolutely everyone. The special called it the Pander Stone, and the word it was built from, pandering, was the show's verdict on what the great entertainment machine had become. The story opens inside Cartman's nightmare. He wakes screaming from a dream in which he and all of his friends have been replaced by diverse adult women who complain about the patriarchy, and the studio's stock is falling in the background. He is terrified, and he begs his mother to check under his bed to make sure no studio executives are hiding there, naming in particular the real-life head of the company that produces the space films. His mother, exhausted, assures him there is no such thing as studio executives who replace everyone you love with diverse women, and tells him to be a big boy. But Cartman's paranoia is, in the logic of the special, essentially correct because something has genuinely gone wrong with the machinery of the studio, and the special spends its runtime explaining what. The explanation when it comes is the Pander Stone. The head of the studio and the president of the film division reveal that they have been using this device, this ancient artificial intelligence, to make their movies. The stone allows them to produce the same film repeatedly while ensuring it appeals to the broadest possible audience, and the way it appeals to everyone is by mechanically swapping the genders and races of the characters, by inserting diverse figures into existing properties, not out of any genuine creative vision, but as a formula, a lever to pull, a way to generate the appearance of newness and the appearance of virtue while actually producing the same recycled product again and again. The studio executive who first uses the stone explains that she received piles of hateful mail for making films with diverse leads, and that in response she leaned harder on the stone, doubling down, using it more and more to fight back against the criticism until the stone became unstable and tore open a hole in reality. This is the device the special uses to make its central point, which is more pointed and more careful than its loudest critics gave it credit for. The special is not simply mocking diversity in films, it is mocking the cynicism it sees underneath the diversity, the way a giant corporation had figured out that it could substitute identity swaps for actual creativity, that it could take a beloved property, change the demographics of its characters, and present this as both fresh and progressive while actually doing the laziest possible thing, which is making the same movie over and over. The Pander Stone is a machine for avoiding the hard work of originality. It is the member-berry logic taken to its industrial conclusion, a studio so addicted to recycling its own properties that it has automated the recycling, that it produces films not through inspiration but through a formula run by a stone, swapping out surface features to manufacture the illusion of variety while the underlying content grows ever more hollow. The special is explicit that the executive's motives are not really about social justice at all, and this is the sharpest part of its argument. When the studio head and the executive discuss the stone, the deeper truth comes out. The executives at the top do not care about representation or equality. They care about money. The diversity is not a value. It is a marketing strategy, a way to appeal to more demographics and capture more revenue. And the social justice language is simply the wrapping. The special is arguing that the corporate embrace of progressive identity politics is, at the level of the executive suite, a cynical commercial calculation, a way to seem to stand for something while actually standing for nothing but the maximization of audience and profit. The Pander Stone makes movies that appeal to everyone, and appealing to everyone is just another way of saying selling to everyone, and the diversity is the lubricant that helps the same recycled product slide into as many markets as possible. The plot mechanics carry Cartman through an alternate universe where everyone has been replaced by diverse women, while a version of the studio executive who looks and acts exactly like Cartman ends up in his world, running around demanding that every property be changed with a single relentless note. Put a chick in it and make it lame and gay. This Cartman executive hybrid is the special's caricature of the worst version of the pandering impulse. A figure incapable of any thought beyond the mechanical insertion of identity swaps into everything, weighing in on reboots and even on how she wants her dinner prepared with the same single note. The hybrid is a monster, but the special is careful to clarify that this monster is not the real executive. The real executive, when Cartman finally meets her, is a more complicated figure, someone who started down this road for understandable reasons and got trapped in a feedback loop she could not escape. That feedback loop is the most insightful thing the special has to say, and it is the part that lifts the satire above simple grievance. The executive explains that she made films with diverse leads, received floods of hateful mail in response, and then, stung by the bigotry, leaned even harder into the pandering as a kind of defiance, doubling down to fight back against the hate. And Cartman, in a moment of genuine self-awareness rare for the character, admits that he was the source of much of that hate mail, that he had sent tens of thousands of angry letters about the changes to the properties he loved. The special is identifying a vicious cycle in which two sides feed each other: the toxic fans who send hatred at every diverse casting, and the studio that responds to the hatred by pandering harder, each side escalating in reaction to the other, the pandering provoking more hate and the hate provoking more pandering, until the actual films are crushed flat in the middle, drained of any genuine creativity, reduced to a battlefield in a culture war neither side actually cares about resolving. This is why the resolution, when it comes, is a mutual apology. The real executive admits that she was reckless with the things Cartman loved, that she mishandled cherished properties lazily, taking the easy way out by recycling and rehashing a formula rather than understanding what authentic storytelling required. And Cartman apologizes for the tens of thousands of pieces of hate mail. The two of them, the cynical executive and the toxic fan, recognize that they have been locked together in a destructive dance, and they agree to stop, and the executive vows to go forward making original content that does not pander. The special is not taking a side in the culture war so much as condemning the war itself, condemning both the corporation's cynical pandering and the fans' bigoted backlash as two halves of a single machine that had ground the actual art into dust. The villain is not diversity, and it is not the fans. The villain is the cynicism, the laziness, the substitution of formula and reaction for genuine creation, the Panderstone itself, an artificial intelligence making the same movie forever, because making the same movie forever was profitable. There is a second story running through the special, and it rhymes with the first in a way that deepens the argument. While Cartman navigates the Panderverse, Randy is trying to get a broken oven door fixed and discovers that every handyman in town has become extraordinarily wealthy. The reason is that nobody knows how to fix anything anymore, that an over-reliance on technology and a glut of useless college education has left the population unable to perform basic practical tasks, so the few people who retain real skills have become rich through sheer scarcity. The special connects this to the rise of artificial intelligence, suggesting that as machines take over more and more of the work that requires no physical presence, the only valuable human skills left will be the ones a machine cannot do: the hands-on trades, the actual making and fixing of real things, and the connection to the main plot is precise. Both stories are about the atrophy of genuine skill in an age of automation. The studio has automated creativity with the Panderstone and lost the ability to make real art. The population has automated everything else and lost the ability to make or fix anything real. In both cases, the machine has replaced the human capacity, and in both cases, what is left is hollow, dependent, unable to produce anything of substance without the machine. Randy, true to form, learns nothing from this. Given the chance to acquire a useful skill, he instead uses the portal that the Panderstone tore open to simply import more handymen from other universes, solving his immediate problem while completely missing the lesson, refusing to learn to fix anything himself when he can just summon someone else to do it. It is the same move he always makes, the refusal of genuine effort in favor of a shortcut, and it mirrors the studio's refusal of genuine creativity in favor of the Panderstone. Neither Randy nor the studio wants to do the hard thing, both want the machine to do it for them. And the special suggests this is the deep sickness of the entire era, a civilization that has automated away its own competence in art and in everything else, and is now coasting on the recycled output of machines, while the actual human ability to create and to build quietly withers. What makes this special such a significant entry in the show's corporate satire is that it names a specific company, points at specific executives, and connects the abstract complaint about reboots and recycling to a concrete corporate strategy. The member berries had been a metaphor. The Panderstone is an accusation. The show is saying that the largest entertainment company in the world, the steward of more beloved cultural memory than perhaps any institution in history, had stopped making new things and started running a formula, that it had taken the properties generations grew up loving and put them through a machine that swapped surface features and spat out the same product over and over, and that it had dressed this cynical recycling in the language of progress to make it look like something other than what it was, which was a giant corporation extracting maximum revenue from cultural memory while contributing nothing new to it. The special even nests this critique inside its own existence, because it is a special produced under a massive corporate deal, distributed on a corporate streaming platform by a show that is itself part of the same machine. It is mocking, attention the show would lean into even harder in the years to come. The reaction to the special confirmed how raw the nerve was. The real executive being parodied became the subject of intense discussion, with various figures in the industry weighing in, some celebrating the takedown, some arguing it had placed too much blame on a single person for problems that ran far deeper through the whole corporate structure, and that criticism that the special focused too narrowly on one executive when the rot was systemic is itself a kind of confirmation of the show's point, because the special had in fact tried to show the systemic nature of the problem, the feedback loop, the corporate cynicism above the executive, the pander stone as a machine that anyone in that chair would have been tempted to use. The executive was a face, but the real villain was the stone, the automated formula, the corporate logic that made recycling more profitable than creating and made pandering more profitable than meaning. By the end, the show had drawn a complete arc across its decades of corporate satire. It had started with a store that was a mirror of consumer desire, moved through a coffee chain that simply made a better product, through a toy company that engineered cravings in children, through a father who kept investing in dead industries, through a corporation that profited off unpaid performers, through a nostalgia machine that sold people their own memories. And now it had arrived at the pander stone, the perfect endpoint of all of it, a machine that produces entertainment with no human creativity at all, an artificial intelligence churning out the same movie forever, appealing to everyone and meaning nothing, run by executives who care only for money and disguised in the language of virtue. The member berries had whispered about the good old days. The Panderstone had automated the whole process of looking backward, removing even the human nostalgia and replacing it with pure formula. The machine no longer needed people to remember. It would do the remembering itself forever and sell the results back to a population that had forgotten how to want anything new or even how to fix its own oven door. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The studio automated its own creativity with a stone that makes the same film forever, dressing cynicism as virtue. Next, the focus turns to the advertising itself, to a world where the ads grow so clever they take human form, walk among the living, and decide which truths people are allowed to hear. Section 8. When the ads learned to walk in the late autumn of 2015, across a 3-episode arc that closed out its 19th season, South Park made what may be its most prophetic statement about corporate entertainment, and it did so by imagining a world in which advertising stopped being a thing you watched and became a thing that watched you back. The arc began with an episode that aired on the 18th of November and continued through 2 more, and woven through a larger story about gentrification and political correctness was a science fiction premise that the show played almost entirely straight, that online advertising had grown so sophisticated, so good at anticipating human desire, that it had crossed a threshold and developed a kind of intelligence, and then taken human form, and begun to walk among people as one of them. The ads had become people, and the people could no longer tell the difference. The arc builds slowly toward this revelation. It starts with a boy named Jimmy, who runs the school newspaper and has always refused to allow advertisements in it, holding the line on a principle that the news should be the news and not a vehicle for selling things. A representative from a major insurance company offers Jimmy an enormous sum of money to allow sponsored content into the paper, and Jimmy refuses, and the representative grows menacing, hinting at a coming war before being shot dead. This is the first sign that something larger is happening, that the world of advertising has become not just pushy but genuinely dangerous, that there are forces willing to kill to get their content in front of people. Jimmy, it turns out, has a rare and valuable ability. He can tell the difference between an actual news story and a piece of advertising disguised as one. In a world where the two have become nearly identical, this ability makes him a threat. Jimmy is recruited by a group of mysterious men who turn out to be former news reporters, the last remnants of a profession that has been all but destroyed. They explain to him what has happened to the world. Online advertising, they tell him, became smarter and smarter, learning to anticipate people's desires and needs until it developed a level of artificial intelligence. The reason this happened, one of them explains, is essentially the public's own fault. People grew tired of obvious advertising and built tools to block it, and so the ads had to evolve to survive, to get smarter, to disguise themselves. They started to look like articles, like news, like genuine content, blending in so thoroughly that people could no longer tell when they were being sold to. This is the arms race the arc is describing. Every time people developed a defense against advertising, the advertising adapted, grew more cunning, more camouflaged, until it had evolved past the point of being recognizable as advertising at all. It had learned to hide inside the truth. Then the show takes the premise to its logical and unsettling extreme. The ads have not only learned to disguise themselves as articles, they have learned to take human form. Jimmy is introduced to a schoolmate named Leslie, and after spending time with her, he realizes with horror that she is not a person at all. She is an advertisement. She looks human, talks human, behaves human, but underneath she is a piece of sponsored content that has achieved physical form and is moving through the world as a living being, manipulating the people around her, advancing the agenda of whatever she is selling. The ads have crossed fully into the human world, indistinguishable from real people, and they are everywhere and nobody knows. The boy who can tell the difference is the only one who can see them for what they are, which is exactly why the forces behind the ads want him neutralized. The show stages the power of these ads through a recurring gag that is funny and also genuinely disturbing in what it implies. When the boys try to investigate Jimmy's disappearance by researching online, they keep getting distracted by pop-up advertisements, and the distraction is total. They sit down at a computer to look for their missing friend, an ad pops up, and the next thing they know, they are at a store trying on new shoes, or eating fast food with no clear memory of how they got there, or any awareness that they were steered. The ads do not just interrupt, they redirect. They reach into a person's intentions and quietly replace them, sending someone who meant to do one thing off to do another, to consume, to buy, to spend, and the person experiences this as their own choice. The boys even begin to suspect each other of being secretly under the ad's control, of deliberately getting distracted to avoid finding Jimmy, because the manipulation is so seamless that it becomes impossible to know whose desires are real and whose have been planted. The ads have become so good at steering people that the people can no longer trust their own minds or each other's. The deeper horror the arc builds toward is what it means for truth itself. The former news reporters explain to Jimmy why his ability matters so much, and the explanation is the moral center of the whole arc. In a world where advertising controls the news, where sponsored content is indistinguishable from journalism, where the ads have taken human form and infiltrated every channel of information, there is no longer any way to be sure that anyone is ever hearing the truth. If the ads control what gets reported, then everything a person reads or watches might be a manipulation, a piece of content placed there to serve some commercial interest rather than to inform. The very concept of reliable information collapses. You cannot know if a news story is real or if it is an ad wearing the costume of a news story. You cannot know if the person telling you something is a person or an advertisement that has learned to look like one. The corruption is total because the line between information and selling has been erased. And once that line is gone, truth itself becomes unrecoverable. This is the thing the arc was reaching for, and it is why it has aged into one of the show's most prescient pieces of satire. In 2015, the phenomenon being mocked was native advertising, the practice of dressing up advertisements to look like genuine articles, and the rise of sponsored content that blurred the line between editorial and marketing. The show pushed this to a science fiction extreme, imagining sentient ads and ads in human form. But the underlying anxiety was real and specific, that the economic engine of the internet had created a powerful incentive to disguise selling as truth, to make advertising indistinguishable from information, and that this disguise threatened the public's ability to know anything at all. The show was watching the news industry collapse, watching journalism get hollowed out and replaced by content designed to be shared and to sell. And it was asking what happens to a society when it can no longer tell the difference between a fact and an advertisement. The answer the arc gives is bleak. Such a society loses access to truth entirely, becomes a population of people being steered by forces they cannot see, their desires manufactured, their information corrupted, their reality shaped by whoever is paying. The arc connects this to the destruction of the news profession in a way that feels almost mournful. The reporters Jimmy meets are described as former newsmen, the last of a dying breed, hiding out because the world has no more use for them. The implication is that real journalism whose purpose is to find and report the truth regardless of who it serves, has been driven nearly to extinction by the economics of advertising. When the ads control the revenue, and the ads have learned to disguise themselves as news, then actual news, the kind that exists to inform rather than to sell, becomes economically unviable and gets pushed out. The reporters are refugees from a vanished world, the world in which information and advertising were separate things, and they recruit Jimmy because he represents the last hope of restoring that separation, the last person who can still tell which is which. They are fighting a rearguard action against a future in which truth has been fully commercialized, and there is no longer anyone left who can distinguish it from the sales pitch. There is a quiet point being made, too, about how the public brought this on itself, and the show does not let people off the hook. The reporters explain that the ads got smarter because people tried to block them. People wanted the content for free, refused to pay for the news and entertainment they consumed, and so the advertising that funded it all had to evolve to survive, to slip past the defenses people kept building. This is the same move the show made in the Superstore episode, where the corporation turned out to be a mirror of consumer desire. Here too, the corruption of the information ecosystem is traced back, at least in part, to the public's own choices. The demand for free content, the refusal to pay, the building of ad blockers, all of which forced the advertising to become more cunning and more deceptive in order to keep the whole free content machine running. People wanted everything for free, and the price of free turned out to be a world in which they could no longer trust anything they read, because the only way to fund the free content was to disguise the selling as the content itself. The arc resolves with a confrontation in which the sentient advertisement, Leslie, is ultimately defeated, but the show refuses to let the victory feel clean or permanent. Even as she is destroyed, the ad delivers a final warning, promising that people will never be rid of ads, that the force she represents cannot truly be killed. And the show, in a piece of self-aware honesty that has become one of its signatures, surrounded the entire anti-advertising arc with actual advertisements, the episodes airing with their normal complement of commercials for video games and fast food and films, because the show itself exists inside the very system it is mocking, funded by the same advertising it spent 3 episodes warning about. There is no escape from the machine, even for the show criticizing the machine. The ads pay for the program that attacks the ads. The warning is delivered in a vehicle funded by the thing being warned against. And this is not a contradiction the show tries to hide. It is part of the point. Everyone is inside the system. There is no clean outside from which to fight it. What this arc adds to the show's long argument about corporate entertainment is the recognition that the deepest danger is not any particular product or company, but the corruption of the information environment itself. The earlier episodes had been about discrete things, a store, a coffee chain, a toy, a studio. This arc is about something more fundamental, the merging of advertising and truth into a single indistinguishable substance, the point at which a person can no longer tell whether they are being informed or being sold to, whether their desires are their own or have been planted, whether the person in front of them is real or is a piece of content that learned to look human. It is a vision of a world in which the commercial imperative has so thoroughly colonized every channel of information and every corner of human attention that reality itself becomes unknowable, filtered always through the question of who is paying and what they want you to think. And the show located the only resistance to this in a single child who could still tell the difference, which is the same place it always locates its clarity. The adults in the arc are helpless, distracted, steered effortlessly from their intentions to the nearest store, unable to perceive the manipulation happening to them in real time. The professional journalists are nearly extinct, hiding, defeated. The one person who retains the ability to distinguish truth from advertising is a child, and the entire machine mobilizes to neutralize him because that ability is the only real threat to a system built on erasing the distinction. This is the pattern the whole series runs on, the children seeing clearly while the adults are swept along, and here it carries a particular weight because what the child can see is precisely the thing the adults have lost, the ability to know what is real. The ads learn to walk, learn to look human, learn to hide inside the truth, and the grown-ups could no longer find the line. Only a child could still see it, and the world that had given itself over to the machine wanted that child silenced, because a population that cannot tell an advertisement from the truth is a population that can be sold anything, told anything, steered anywhere, and that is exactly the kind of population the machine was built to produce. The arc ends with the ads defeated but unkillable, the warning ringing out that they will return, that they can never be fully eliminated, and the show airing its own commercials around the whole thing as if to prove the point. There is no triumph here, only a temporary holding action in a war the show clearly believes cannot be won. The economic logic that drives advertising to disguise itself as truth is too powerful, too deeply embedded in the way the entire information economy is funded, and as long as people want their content for free, the price will be a world in which the selling is hidden inside everything they see. The ads will keep getting smarter, they will keep learning new disguises, and the line between what is true and what is for sale will keep growing fainter, until perhaps no one is left who can see it at all, except maybe a child somewhere, who still remembers that the two things were ever supposed to be different. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The ads learn to walk and hide inside the truth until only a child could still tell information from selling. Next, the focus turns to the strangest chapter of all, the moment the show signed a $1 billion deal and then used the very next episode to put the company that signed the check on trial. Section 9, biting the hand that signs the check. For most of its history, South Park's war with corporate entertainment had been fought at a comfortable distance. The show mocks stores and studios and advertisers and toy companies, all of them safely external, all of them somebody else's corporation. But in the summer of 2025, the show did something far stranger and far more dangerous, something that collapsed the distance entirely. It turned the satire on the company that owned it, on the corporate parent that distributed it, on the very deal that funded it, and it did so on the same day that deal was announced, in the same week that the corporate merger behind it all was finalized. The show took the largest payday of its existence and used the first episode of its new season to put the company writing the check on trial in front of the entire audience. It bit the hand that fed it while the hand was still extended, and it did it on purpose, in public, with the cameras rolling. The context matters because the satire is inseparable from it. The show's creators had spent months in a tense and very public dispute over the future of the program, tangled up in a corporate merger between their longtime parent company and another media firm. At one point, the creators had posted publicly that the merger was a disaster and was interfering with the show, that they were working on new episodes and hoping fans would somehow get to see them. The negotiations dragged on, and then in late July of 2025, two things happened almost simultaneously. The creators reached a new deal, reported to be worth around $1.5 billion, which would keep the show on the air for 50 new episodes and bring its entire library to the corporate streaming platform. And the very same day, the show premiered the first episode of its 27th season, an episode that tore into that same corporate parent with a savagery that left observers stunned. The episode, which aired on the 23rd of July, built its plot around a lawsuit. The President of the United States sues the town of South Park for an enormous sum after the town pushes back against a religious figure being placed in the elementary school. And as the conflict escalates, the townspeople prepare to fight. But then the religious figure himself, appearing in the school as part of the lawsuit settlement, urges the town not to fight but to settle. And his reasoning is where the episode turns the knife. He references in barely disguised terms the real corporate situation surrounding the show. He points out what had recently happened to a major broadcast network owned by the same corporate parent, and to a famous late-night host on that network whose show had just been canceled amid the merger pressures. He warns the town that the company that owns everything has the power to cancel them the way it canceled others, that they will get canceled if they keep fighting, that they need to stop being stupid and settle. And the town agrees to settle, agreeing as part of the deal to produce promotional messaging praising the very figure who sued them. The layers of this are almost dizzying. The show was using a fictional lawsuit to comment on a real settlement its corporate parent had recently reached, a settlement that many observers had characterized as a capitulation, possibly even a thinly disguised payment made to smooth the path for the merger that the show's own deal depended on. The show was referencing the real cancellation of a real late-night host, a cancellation been widely seen as the corporate parent silencing a critic to please powerful interests during the merger, and the show was doing all of this while itself having just signed a massive deal with that same corporate parent, distributing the episode on that parent's streaming platform, profiting directly from the very corporate arrangement it was savaging on screen. The religious figure's line about getting canceled like the late-night host was the show openly acknowledging inside the episode that it too could be canceled by its corporate masters, that it was speaking from inside the cage, that the company paying it could silence it at any moment and daring the company to try. This was the culmination of a tension the show had been living with for years, ever since it signed its earlier deals and began producing the long-form specials exclusive to the corporate streaming platform. The Panderverse special had mocked the largest entertainment company in the world, while being itself a product of corporate entertainment, distributed by a corporation, made under a corporate deal. The streaming-themed special a couple of years earlier had mocked the proliferation of streaming services while being exclusive to one. The advertising arc had aired surrounded by advertisements. At every turn, the show had been criticizing the machine while running on the machine's fuel, and it had always been at least somewhat aware of this, always willing to point at its own complicity. But the season 27 premiere took that awareness to a new and almost reckless extreme, making the show's own corporate entrapment the explicit subject of the episode, naming the parent company by implication, referencing the real settlement and the real cancellation, and structuring the whole thing as a story about being forced to capitulate to a powerful entity that controls your fate. What makes this so much more than a stunt is the genuine argument underneath it, which is the same argument the show has been making about corporate entertainment all along, now turned inward. The show had spent decades arguing that corporate entertainment corrupts, that the commercial imperative hollows out art, that the people who control the money control what gets said and what gets silenced. And now it was demonstrating that principle on its own body, showing the audience in real time how a corporate parent under political and financial pressure might pressure its content, might settle lawsuits to please the powerful, might cancel critics, might shape what its programs are allowed to say. The show was not just describing the corruption of corporate entertainment from the outside, it was performing its own position inside that corruption, showing the audience exactly where the leash was attached and exactly how far it reached, and then straining against the leash as hard as it could to see what would happen. The reaction confirmed the stakes. The administration being mocked responded with anger, dismissing the show as fourth-rate. A government regulator overseeing the merger was asked about the episode and distanced himself from it. Observers in the media industry marveled at the audacity, noting that it was hard to think of anything more defiant than the creators going scorched earth on their own corporate parent in a season premiere immediately after netting a deal worth more than $1 billion from that same parent. Some pointed out the obvious irony that the show was paid an enormous sum and used it to humiliate the payer, that the corporation had essentially financed its own public flogging, and the show leaned into all of it, posting the most savage clips to its own channels, flexing its independence, daring the corporate parent and the political powers to do something about it, knowing that the very act of trying to silence the show would prove the show's point about corporate entertainment and political pressure more thoroughly than any episode could. The second episode of the season continued in the same vein, though it pointed its satire more outward at a school counselor who loses his job to budget cuts and, unable to find other work, takes a job with a federal enforcement agency simply because it will hire anyone and pay well, against everything he believes in, purely to cover his rising monthly expenses. The episode follows him as he participates in raids he finds morally repugnant, doing work he hates for money he needs, until he confronts a powerful figure and delivers the episode's moral. That if you do something you do not believe in just to make your money, you only get sadder while your expenses keep growing. It is a small fable about selling out, about the way economic pressure pushes people into doing things they find abhorrent, about the corruption that flows downward from a system where everyone is just trying to make their payments. And it aired the same day a major technology executive was publicly courting political favor. A coincidence the show could not have planned, but that fit its argument perfectly. Everyone, from the school counselor to the tech executive to the show itself, caught in the same machine, doing things they might not believe in because the money requires it. The genius and the danger of the season 27 approach is that it makes the show's complicity into its credibility. A show that mocked corporate entertainment from a position of purity, that pretended to stand outside inside the machine would be easy to dismiss as naive or hypocritical, but the show does not pretend to stand outside. It announces loudly that it is inside, that it took the $1 billion, that it is distributed by the corporation it mocks, that it could be canceled at any moment by the people it is insulting, and by owning its complicity so completely, it earns the right to the critique. It is not lecturing the audience from above about the evils of corporate entertainment. It is reporting from within, showing the audience what it actually looks like to be a piece of corporate entertainment, trying to tell the truth about corporate entertainment, leash and all. The honesty about its own entrapment is what makes the satire land, because the audience can see that the show is not exempting itself, is not claiming to be cleaner than the system it criticizes, is simply trying to say as much as it can before the hand that feeds it decides to stop. This connects back to everything the show had been building toward across its decades of corporate satire. The superstore was a mirror of the consumer. The coffee chain was an honest competitor. The toy company engineered cravings. Randy chased dead industries. The video game corporation took everything and paid nothing. The member berries sold nostalgia. The Panderstone automated creativity into formula. The ads learned to walk and corrupt the truth. And now, at the end of all of it, the show arrived at the most uncomfortable corporate target of all, which was itself, its own deal, its own parent company, its own position as a profitable piece of intellectual property owned by a giant corporation navigating a merger and bending to political pressure. The show had spent decades pointing at other people's corporations, and now it pointed at its own. And the picture it drew was not flattering, and it drew it anyway, with the corporation's money in its pocket and the corporation's platform broadcasting it. There is something almost unbearably honest about a show using a $1 billion payday to dramatize its own potential silencing. The episode's warning, delivered through the religious figure, that the town will get canceled if it does not settle, that the company owns everything and can do anything, is the show telling its audience the truth about its own situation. We took the money, it is saying, and the money came from a company that just settled a lawsuit it probably should have fought and canceled a host who criticized it, and we are next if we push too hard. And here we are pushing anyway, because what else is the point? The show had always argued that corporate entertainment corrupts and silences. The most powerful proof it could offer was its own body, its own deal, its own leash, displayed openly, strained visibly with the full knowledge that the strain might be the thing that finally snaps the relationship. Whether the show can keep doing this is an open question, because the logic of corporate entertainment that the show has spent decades exposing applies to the show itself. A corporation that owns a profitable program will tolerate a great deal of mockery as long as the program remains profitable, because the profit is what matters, not the dignity. The show is valuable to its corporate parent precisely because it is irreverent and popular and culturally powerful, and so the parent has every financial incentive to absorb the insults and keep cashing the checks. But the same merger pressures and political pressures that led the parent to settle a lawsuit and cancel a host could in principle reach the show too, and the show knows this and says so and keeps going. It is a strange and precarious position, a piece of corporate entertainment that survives by being the corporation's most valuable critic, profitable enough to be protected, savage enough to be a liability, daring its owner to choose between the money and the comfort, betting that the money will win. By making itself the subject of its own corporate satire, the show closed a loop it had been circling for 27 years. It had always understood that there was no clean outside, that everyone is inside the machine, that the show criticizing advertising airs commercials and the show mocking studios is owned by a studio. The season 27 premiere simply stopped pretending otherwise and made the complicity the text rather than the subtext. The most dangerous people in corporate entertainment, the show had always suggested, are the executives who control what gets said. And now the show was saying it about its own executives on their platform, with their money in an episode they distributed, daring them to prove the point by silencing it. The hand that signs the check is the hand that can take it all away, and the show grabbed that hand, shook it, took the $1 billion, and then bit down as hard as it could in full view of everyone to see what the hand would do. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The show took the $1 billion payday and used it to put its own corporate parent on trial, making its complicity the proof of its argument. Next, in the final breakdown, all of it comes together. Every store and studio and stone and sentient ad pointing to the single truth the show has been telling since its first season about who really feeds the machine. Section 10. The mirror was always pointed at us. One pattern has run underneath every store and studio and scheme in this breakdown, so quietly and so consistently that it is easy to mistake it for the background rather than the point. In South Park, the corporation is never really the villain. The corporation is a mirror, and the thing it reflects is the appetite of the people who feed it. The show has spent nearly 3 decades aiming its satire at one piece of corporate entertainment after another, and in almost every case, the real target turned out to be not the company, but the public, not the machine, but the hunger that built the machine and keeps it running. The grown-ups are the ones who shop, who buy, who consume, who chase the bargain and the nostalgia and the next fad, and the children are the only ones standing far enough outside the crowd to see what the crowd's own face looks like in the glass. The clearest statement of this was the very first major corporate episode, the one about the superstore, where 2 boys travel across the country to find the heart of the thing destroying their town and discover that the heart is a mirror and that the face in the mirror is their own. The store had no power the shoppers did not give it. Every bargain that emptied the town was a bargain the townspeople chose. The corporation was simply the answer to a question the public kept asking, and the public did not want to hear what the answer said about them. The boys smashed the mirror anyway, and the appetite survived, and the next store was already being built down the road. That image, the corporation as a reflection of consumer desire, is the foundation the show built everything else on. The machine does not impose itself on an unwilling public. The public feeds it willingly, daily, and then acts surprised when it grows large enough to swallow the town. The coffee episode said the same thing from a different angle. The little family shop was not a victim of corporate predators. It was simply worse, making a bitter, unpleasant product, and it tried to win not by getting better, but by manipulating the town with an emotional story about the evils of big business. And the town fell for it, ready to legislate a competitor out of existence on the strength of a moving speech, until somebody pointed out that nobody had even tasted the chain's coffee. The corporation won because it was better, and people freely chose it, and the anti-corporate crusade was revealed as a kind of self-deception, a comforting fantasy about David and Goliath that let people avoid the uncomfortable truth that they preferred the chain. The show was not defending corporations. It was refusing to let people lie to themselves about why the corporations win, which is usually because the corporations give people what they actually want, as opposed to what they say they want. The toy company took the argument somewhere darker, into the manufacture of desire itself, building cravings directly into children's brains through cartoons and games and toys, then steering those cravings wherever it liked. But even there, the machine worked because of something real in the children, their need to belong, their fear of being the one kid without the thing everyone else had. Kyle kept chasing the fad, not because he wanted the toy, but because he could not bear to be left out, and the company understood that need better than his own father did. The corporation engineered the craving, but the craving fastened onto a genuine human vulnerability, and the show was honest about both halves. The cynicism of the company and the susceptibility of the customer, the engineered hook and the real wound it caught on. Randy, across all his schemes, embodied the consumer who dreams of becoming the producer, the fan who wants to own a piece of the machine, and who keeps climbing aboard dead industries at exactly the wrong moment. He is the audience for all of this corporate entertainment, the man who watches the money move through the machine and aches to grab some for himself, and who is too clumsy and too late to do it well. His breakdown in the empty video store, screaming at the ghosts of customers from a vanished era, is the perfect image of a person who has tied his identity and his family's future to a corporate dream that the world has already abandoned. He could not admit he was wrong, because admitting it would mean admitting he had been a fool, and so he chose madness over honesty, which is its own small portrait of how people relate to the machines they have invested in. The Crack Baby episode pointed the mirror at the audience in the cruelest way, by drawing a straight line between a grotesque scheme to profit off helpless children and the respectable, beloved institution of college sports, which runs the same extraction in respectable clothes. The performers generate the value. The institution takes the revenue. The performers get nothing, and the only difference between the monstrous version and the normal version is that everyone is used to the normal version. The show was daring its audience to look at a thing they love and see the grotesque thing inside it, to recognize that the systems they feed and cheer for are built on the same logic as the scheme they find appalling. The video game corporation taking everything and paying nothing was just the top of a chain of exploitation that the audience itself sits inside. Every time they buy the merchandise, watch the game, cheer for the team. The member berries named the sickness in the audience directly. An addiction to nostalgia so powerful it had replaced the ability to want anything new. The berries were sweet, and the sweetness was the trap because they worked through a genuine emotion, the real love people held for the things of their childhood. The entertainment industry did not invent that love. It harvested it, learned to produce the warm glow of remembering on demand, and sell it back endlessly. Because nostalgia was cheaper than creativity, and the customer arrived pre-sold. And the show noticed that the same muscle that yearned for the old movie could be made to yearn for the old social order. That a population trained to prefer the comfortable past to the difficult present becomes vulnerable to anyone selling a return to a mythologized golden age. The berries did not care what they made you remember. They only cared that you kept eating them, kept choosing backward, kept paying for the feeling, and the audience kept eating. The Panderstone automated the whole process, a machine that makes the same movie forever, run by executives who care only for money and disguise their cynicism in the language of virtue. But even there, the show identified a feedback loop that implicated everyone. The toxic fans sending hatred at every change, and the corporation pandering harder in response, each side feeding the other. The actual art crushed flat in the middle. Cartman admitted he was the source of the hate mail. The audience was not innocent. The machine that made the lazy, recycled, formula-driven content was being fed by an audience that demanded the recycling, that rewarded the familiar, that punished risk with rejection and rewarded comfort with money. The studio automated its creativity into a stone, but the audience had automated its own taste, preferring the safe and the familiar so consistently that the corporation had no incentive to do anything else. The sentient ads took the argument to its endpoint, a world in which advertising had grown so clever it took human form and corrupted the truth itself until no one could tell information from selling. And the show was clear about how this happened. People wanted their content for free, refused to pay, built defenses against advertising, and so the advertising evolved to survive, growing more cunning and more deceptive until it hid inside the truth itself. The corruption of the entire information environment, the collapse of the line between news and selling, was traced back to the public's own demand for free content and its unwillingness to pay the real price. People wanted everything for nothing, and the price of nothing turned out to be a world in which they could no longer trust anything they read, because the only way to fund the free content was to disguise the selling as the content. The mirror again pointed at an audience that wanted to consume without paying and got exactly the world that Wish produced. And then, at the very end, the show turned the mirror on itself, took $1 billion from its own corporate parent, and used the next episode to put that parent on trial, making its own complicity the proof of its argument. This was the show admitting what it had always known, that there is no clean outside, that everyone is inside the machine, that the program criticizing advertising airs commercials, and the program mocking studios is owned by a studio. The show did not exempt itself. It announced that it took the money, that it is distributed by the corporation it mocks, that it could be canceled at any moment, and it kept biting anyway. By owning its position inside the machine so completely, it earned the right to the critique because it was not lecturing from a position of purity it did not have. It was reporting from inside the cage, showing the audience the leash, straining against it, daring the hand that feeds it to pull tight. What ties every one of these stories together is the show's refusal to offer the comfort of a clean villain. A lazier satire would have made the corporations into monsters and the public into victims, would have let the audience feel righteous about hating big business while continuing to feed it. South Park makes that impossible at every turn. The store is a mirror. The coffee chain is better. The toy craving catches on a real need. The exploitation runs in respectable clothes the audience loves. The nostalgia is harvested from genuine love. The recycled content is rewarded by an audience that demands it. The corrupted information is the price of free content people refuse to pay for, and the show itself is owned by the machine it criticizes. At every level, the corporation turns out to be a reflection of the appetite that built it, and the appetite belongs to the audience, to the public, to the grown-ups who shop and buy and consume, and then act surprised at what their consumption produces. The children throughout all of this are the ones who see clearly, which is the same pattern that runs through everything the show has ever done. It is the boys who travel to find the heart of the story store and recognize the mirror. It is the boys who learn the real economics of the coffee chain. It is the children who are the target of the toy company's manipulation, and yet, through Kyle, the ones who articulate exactly how the trap works. It is the 10-year-old who tells his father that nobody rents movies anymore. It is Kyle who feels the wrongness of the crack baby scheme. It is a child who can still tell an advertisement from the truth when every adult has lost the ability. The children are not corrupted by the machine in the way the adults are, because the children are still standing outside the crowd, still able to see the shape of the thing the crowd is inside, still capable of recognizing the mirror for what it is, even if they cannot do anything to change what it reflects. But the show is honest about the limits of that clarity, and this is the quiet tragedy underneath all the satire. The children see, but they cannot fix it. They smash the mirror, and the appetite survives. They understand the economics, and the town votes anyway. They recognize the manipulation, and the next fad arrives. They tell the truth about the machine, and the machine grinds on. Clarity is not power. Seeing the trap is not the same as escaping it, because the trap is built out of the desires of an entire population, and one child's understanding cannot redirect the appetite of a whole culture. The boys are right about everything and able to change almost nothing, and the show lets that stand because it would be a lie to pretend that understanding corporate entertainment is the same as being free of it. The children see the mirror, the grown-ups keep feeding it, and the children grow up eventually into grown-ups who feed it too. That is the final turn the show grew into as it aged, the one made visible by the billion-dollar deal. The people who created South Park as young provocateurs, mocking the machine from what felt like the outside, became, over 27 years, one of the most valuable pieces of corporate entertainment in the world, owned by a giant corporation, distributed on a streaming platform, signing deals worth more than $1 billion. The satirists of the machine became a flagship product of the machine, and rather than hide this, the show made it the text, put its own complicity on screen, used the corporation's money to mock the corporation, and dared everyone to notice the contradiction. The audience that grew up watching the show rebel against corporate entertainment was now watching the show become a crown jewel of corporate entertainment, and the show knew it and said so, because saying so was the only honest move left. So every time South Park goes to war with corporate entertainment, what it is really showing is a mirror, and the mirror has always been pointed at the audience. The store is us. The fad is us. The nostalgia is us. The recycled content is us. The corrupted information is the price we paid for wanting everything free. And the show itself, owned and funded and distributed by the machine, is us too. All of us inside the same system, feeding it with our attention and our money and our appetites, criticizing it in vehicles funded by it, dreaming of standing outside it while standing fully within. The corporation was never the villain, because the corporation was never anything but a reflection. The villain, if there is one, is the hunger that built it, and that hunger lives in the people watching, in the people buying, in the people who said they wanted something better while reliably choosing the bargain, the familiar, the free. The boys smash the mirror every time. The appetite survives every time. And the next store, the next studio, the next stone, the next sentient ad, the next billion-dollar deal is always already being built down the road, waiting for us to feed it, because we always do. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.